know, I don't expect you folks to go through every page, but staff has been doing that, and we're slowly working towards completion. I think the majority of the plan fundamentally is exactly what you folks have talked about in the past. There are a couple things like street connectivity and mapping and layout and all that that we need to work on, but the substance is right there at 85%. So that's where we're at tonight. We're hopeful that you review and move this forward to City Commission for June 22nd. I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Where do you guys want it? Do you need...
If you want to do the podium.
Okay.
Is it on live video or not?
Yes. Should be, right?
Anybody watching from home?
This TV's not on. I don't know if it's supposed to play or not.
Yep. And this is an independent TV. We had to blow up on this. I'll get this one.
Okay.
And do I have a clicker or something?
Can we?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Do you want me to plug your?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then if you want, you can just, I don't know if this, how far away this mouse is gonna work, but
It'll work over there.
it will, okay.
That's perfect. This is the new Now, there used to be a real easy to find switch on TVs. That shows my age, right? All right.
Is it in the house pictures, zip file?
No, it's in the, it's a planning commission presentation that it is there.
Okay. This one?
I've been sharing a home office with my wife for 2 months, so I had to borrow one of hers. All right, thanks, guys. It's good to be back. Good to see everybody in person. It's actually, I've been doing this with other communities by Zoom, obviously, and it's my first time since the shutdown at an in-person meeting, so it actually feels pretty good. Frank went through a lot of the procedural stuff, which I'll repeat again at the end of my presentation, but what I wanted to talk about from a substantive standpoint in terms of the plan is what we've been discussing with staff as significant undeveloped lots, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? Your larger areas of undeveloped land throughout the city, which are a key focus point of the master plan, and what is planned for those, including potential residential development and other types of development. And then after that, I'll get briefly into what Frank just talked about with regard to the schedule for distribution and adoption, and then it'll be up to you guys to decide if you're ready to go ahead and move that process forward. The significant undeveloped lots, here's a map of them around the city. There are 41 lots that we listed as significant undeveloped lots. Now, a lot of them are clustered together, as you'll see. There's probably like 6 to 8 clusters, you can see them on the map there, that form development sites together. So it's not 41 development sites really, it's less than that. And I'm going to tackle them one at a time here. The first one, of course, we talked about this quite a bit last summer, English Hills. The golf course is closed. It's a lot of development site up there. There's been talk about different types of development. So where's the plan at this point? You can see the two lots that make up the English Hills area, and then the church to the south on the other side of the freeway was designated as a significant undeveloped lot because while there's a church on it, a lot of that area is used as recreational space or just kind of left as grass. So there may be a development in the future on that site. So what does the plan show? Plan shows residential growth in that area at 2 to 4 units per acre. You may recall the way that we designated the residential categories in the plan is with that either neighborhood preservation, which is to say an existing neighborhood that's to be left more or less as is, without not be redeveloped or anything like that, and residential growth, which is to say new residential development. So these parcels are all designated for residential growth. You also see the dotted blue and pink lines running across English Hills. Those are conceptual road connections. The blue is road and the pink is bicycle. So you can see that they're basically the same connections we would want to make on both those levels. And again, those are conceptual. The roads may not run exactly those places, but that's where we'd like to see connections in the future. You also may remember this drawing that was done as part of the Alpine sub area. which again is sort of conceptual of how a neighborhood could be built out in that area. We also have and it's not in the presentation, but a bubble diagram Frank did that lays out different types of residential development and how they could fit in that big site. Next one to look at is a little south there, 2605 Bristol, a long rectangular piece in between some neighborhoods and some industrial. There it is on the zoomed in on the significant undeveloped lots map. It's 41 acres. So with this parcel, it's actually cut in half in the plan. The eastern half, adjacent to the residential along Bristol, is designated residential growth 2 to 4 acres, which units per acre, which could be up to 99 residential units in that spot. The western half of the lot designated as community enterprise, which is an industrial category, business, office type category. That's the community tag on there is because it's supposed to be a little less intensive because there's residential in the nearby vicinity. Next one is Richmond Farms. Again, a site you're all familiar with. Laid out as lots, it looks like that, right? 5 and 6, total of about 240 acres. So it stretches all the way up to 3 Mile and all the way down to Richmond. But actually on the plan is kind of interesting because we split it really in thirds here with a couple of other details as well. The northern third is not really a third, but the appendage that goes up to 3 Mile is in amongst some industrial right now, and we've kind of planned that as another industrial site or potentially multiple industrial sites up there. But then south of the old rail corridor, we're planning for a buffer because obviously you have the industrial to the north, so we're going to need some sort of a buffer zone there. You can see there's a pink line running through it for a bike path. That may be a little greenway or something like that along the old railroad track corridor. To the south of that is a little higher density residential development, 4 to 8 units per acre, which that adds up. That's over 1,000 potential residential units right there. But again, that is designated as a site for higher density because of its proximity to employment. And then to the south, as you get closer down to Richmond, would be lower density, 2 to 4 units per acre, right in the vicinity of those existing single-family homes down there. You can also see the circle that shows the hashed green. That's basically designating that somewhere on this site, the southern part of the site towards Richmond, there should be a park or a preserved green space of some description down there. It's not going to be circular. It's not going to be that exact location, but it's designating that this should be part of any development, would be some retained green space and some park space.
Hey, Chris, can
Yeah.
I interject first? Sorry about that.
Sure.
I'll go without the mic. 2 things on this site. You may remember that you precisely platted part of a public street on this property. So that is already in ordinance. And that is the connection essentially from the midpoint of this property up to Key Line. So you already have kind of the backbone laid out for the street. So what Chris did, I think, is right on the money, which is show the preferred connection. And I think that's offset from, is that Mullins on the south?
I think it's Mullins, yeah.
And the other thing is the park in that location. I think it's good to show, I've kind of come around on this. It's good to show a park on this property because of just the location. But if we're going to go that route, then we should also identify a couple of parks in the first ward along the Alpine corridor. Because if you look at our park inventory, there's a lot of people that live there, urban style, and there are no parks there. So somewhere we need to balance out where we're going to plan new parks. So it's a little bit of an aside. You can punt a lot of that to the Parks Committee because the follow-up to this will be we'll update the Parks Master Plan. But we are deficient in park property along the Alpine corridor, both north and south of the expressway.
So there's probably a spot to designate, and I seem to remember we've talked about that earlier in the process as well, but probably a spot to designate on this map.
Agreed.
And again, just conceptually, like a park belongs generally near here, right? We're not going to be able to pick a spot at this point. So that's Richmond Farms. Next kind of big area of undeveloped land is in the Wilson and Richmond area. You can see it on the aerial photo there, and that's how it looks on the lot map. 17 acres on parcel 7, 37 on parcel 8. And this is, again, planned for residential. And again, 2 to 4 units per acre to matching the density, or maybe matching the density of some of the nearby neighborhoods that have been built. You know, we didn't draw in any roads here, but a connection to Moeller is probably logical. And you could probably get a little over 200 units on this piece of land.
And Chris, I'll interrupt one more time, then I'll stay out of Chris's way. The reason we put these SULs together is because these are the ones that are most difficult for the planning commission and the city commission. They're these remaining large undeveloped pieces in various parts of the city that no one wants to see developed from a public standpoint. So these are the ones that are the real challenge for city officials and for city staff. So what we're trying to do is establish some reasonable expectations for density on these properties. Not leave it open-ended, not put everything at 12 units per acre, but let's see how we can blend in a reasonable density so that when people come in and speculate on properties, which happens all the time, we can say, hey, look, here's what you should be thinking for a yield on this property. That's how they do their pro formas, what have you. Don't run wild with your expectations on these properties. Here's the number that the city has agreed upon as reasonable. Okay, I'm done. I'm getting out of Chris's way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's a page in the master plan draft that you may see that lists all of these lots and basically the maximum residential build out, such that no one comes in and says, you know, I need 400 apartments on this site. You say no. It says very clearly in the master plan the max is 68 units, which may not necessarily be single family homes, but are not going to be big apartment buildings, right? So, whoops. Next one is over on Leonard. I didn't have a nice name for this one, so I just gave you the addresses. It's in the western part of the city. You see the lots there, 9 and 10, acreage 25 and 52, so 77 total acres. This area, again, is planned for that 2 to 4 unit per acre residential. So, you know, they're fairly large lots, so you're looking at 300 units, but it's not anything out of the ordinary of what's already built in the neighborhood. Now we get to one that's got a little more going on with it, and that is the land west of Meyer in Standale, that we kind of designated as the West Standale area. It's got the Laker Line station ready to serve it when it's developed. There it is as parcels. It's a bunch of long, thin parcels, which would have to be consolidated by a developer. Adds up to about 100 acres, a little less. And then, as you can see on the land use map, it's a little different than some of the others. So along Lake Michigan Drive back to about 300 feet, we have it in our neighborhood corridor designation, which is a mixed use commercial focused designation, right? So it's not 100% commercial, but it's commercial focused, not residential focused, along Lake Michigan Drive. So that would extend the Standale corridor a little bit, and put some employment near the Laker Line. And then off of Lake Michigan Drive, it's residential at 4 to 8 units per acre. Again, you got the transit in that area, you got the road infrastructure, you got the employment and the amenities. This is the place for the density, and so we planned for it. You guys may also remember this drawing done by a member of our team as part of this process, which lays out how apartments and mixed use could lay out on the site while respecting the wetlands. It's also got some single family at the farther southern end, which would transition into South Walker, because we get into some conservation areas pretty quick. Next one to talk about is Lincoln Lawns, which I know has been discussed a lot in the last few months around here. Here's what the plan designates, or here it is on the lot map, and here's what the plan designates, which is mostly 2 to 4 unit per acre residential. But if you guys can picture that site, just over the city line into Grand Rapids, there's a relatively new apartment complex. And so we kind of edge matched that in the southeast corner with that 4 to 8 units per acre. And then again, there's sort of the designation that there should be a park in this area. And also along Lake Michigan Drive, we have the mixed use category. So a bunch of different stuff. Potentially, the vast majority of the site would be the 2 to 4 units per acre. You can also see the conceptual road connections in there. One strength of this site from a road connection standpoint is that there's no, the golf course hugs Lincoln Lawns Drive, right? So there's no houses on one side of it. And so road connections could be built in there without as much difficulty as maybe some other areas. Versluis Orchards on the other side of the street. Don't know if they're gonna be going anywhere for a while, but if they do, there's the 2 lots, which I think 19 is Versluis and then 20 is something else, but they're right next to each other. And again, like, similarly, along Lake Michigan, we've got the mixed use, and then back behind that is residential at 2 to 4 acres, 2 to 4 units per acre. And that transitions us down to what is actually the next one, which is the O'Brien corridor. So along O'Brien, as we know, people love that wooded character of O'Brien Road, right? That's something we heard during the public engagement, and we want to make sure the master plan reflects that. So there are a whole bunch of SULs along there. That's why and I lumped them all together in the corridor, because the plan is fairly similar for all of them, but these could develop, it may take decades for all these to develop. And these we've designated them differently than all that 2 to 4 units per acre stuff. This is going to be lower density than that. You can see that green color on there. There's only one of the SULs in this area, and that's number 28, I believe, which is on the north side of O'Brien and close to Standale, which is at 2 to 4 units per acre. The rest are at 1 unit per acre as your gross density. So you get 1 unit per acre as the build out, but the master plan calls for smaller lots than that, and then to retain green space. You can see the hatched green all over the place here. And again, it's conceptual, but the idea behind it is that any development in this area should be surrounded by green space. So you get a little neighborhood surrounded by green space, and then the other neighborhood surrounded by green space. Maybe you connect it with a bike path or something. You can also see that along O'Brien itself, maybe it's not that easy to see on there, but along O'Brien itself, we put the hatching because that wooded corridor is important. So any development should be back off that corridor. And the other thing is the southern portion of those lots, there's some topography issues that, among other things, will make it difficult to get sewer back there. So that's a great spot for preservation. And then the Fenske site, which again, we spent a lot of time talking about last summer and fall, down by the bridge there. This is actually quite a few sites. It's numbers 29 through 41, lots of different lots. It does include the sand mine to the north, but we see it kind of as one potential development site. You may find this chart interesting because previously, on all the other slides, all the other sites, we had maximum residential units, and it was like 50, 100, 500, 1,000. And here it's one. And that's because we heard loud and clear from the public that this is not an area for residential development. It's 1 unit per acre on the parcels designated for residential. And then south of that is the industrial park, office park idea that has been in the master plan since the 2007 sub-area plan. That's basically retained here. You can see the darker gray for the heavier industrial to the south, and the lighter gray as you go north, closer to residential. This is a recreation of the 2007 sub-area plan that we have in the plan. And again, it's probably something you guys have seen before. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions or comments or requested revisions regarding any of those sites. We got one from Frank, which is a park in the English Hills area.
And we've been keeping, staff's been generating a list per book for Chris, and we've been sharing that with our staff team plus Terry and Tyler. So I don't want to bombard you folks with pages of emails with edits by page. But we are trying to keep your chair and vice chair in the loop, and it's the minutia of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, I like what you did by these SULs, but any development up on M11 is going to be fought by a lot of people, and MDOT won't do anything with the road. So, in my lifetime, this probably won't happen in my lifetime, but it's just, the more stuff goes in up there, the worse you get, so.
That's in the, you're talking north of Standale or south?
Wilson, south.
South, yeah. I think that's, we heard pretty loud and clear that south of the, we kind of drew a line at the power line corridor that runs south of Lake Michigan Drive, and south of there, there may be, if development occurs, it's going to be low density, and it's going to preserve stuff. It's going to preserve woods, and it's going to preserve natural features. That we heard that loud and clear.
Any place you bump up to medium density residential, those residential people
Yeah, that's true.
It happens every time when it comes here.
Yeah, and I think we also heard loud and clear from MDOT that it's not a priority for them, even though they had a lot of people in the room talking to them, yeah.
Hey, Chris, do we have any kind of a disclaimer in there so that if utilities aren't available for some of those large unit SULs that developer doesn't feel like they're entitled to that anyway? There's quite a few of those areas that are gonna be tough, and you might be able to serve half of it or a quarter of it or something like that, but if they come in and say, I'm entitled to 200 units for this plan, it'd be nice to have something in there that was, that we could use to kind of back that down a little bit if necessary.
Sure, and I can picture a spot for it. I mean, because we are gonna kind of advertise, hey, you could have this many units, and I think, and there's already one disclaimer at the bottom of that chart. We could add a second one, which is to say, utilities are gonna need to be extended at the developer's cost. And
If possible.
Yeah, if possible.
And if
It may not
it's
even be possible.
Then the numbers may go down, so.
Maybe something along the line, the utilities in this area are not available, currently available?
Well,
We could work each one of these up now, but we'd be guessing and speculating.
Right.
And it'll become more clear in the future. So I think it's good to wait, as long as they know that 200 units might turn into 40 units. If there's no sewer or no water, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, we may say something
This
like,
is good stuff. This is the best meeting I've been to yet. It's right next to where I live, Craig. One thing, you're sort of saying these places aren't developed because of utilities aren't there. But a lot of these places where I live, no one's gonna sell it. And they're farmers, they've been there forever, but they're getting old. They got a lot of kids. By the time it gets down to the grandkids, how do you divide those things up? And we're seeing it in several families.
yeah,
And a guy, just a little ways from me, he said he'd never sell. I mean, that's sort of the, I mean, which amazes me. We've got some trees to cut. He doesn't want to sell anything, you know? I mean,
yeah.
so, I mean, that's one reason there's some open spaces out there.
What's actually nice about that from the standpoint of this process is when property owners are saying things like that, that gives us a lot of freedom because we know that they don't have something in mind yet. So if we say, hey, you know, all your neighbors said that you should be pretty low to any density and they don't want to sell, we can go ahead and do that. But I think that, you know, I think we say, you know, the realism is important and we need to say things like, you know, that these maximum densities assume utilities can be built out and that, you know, that may be the cost of any developer. And as, you know, if it's even possible.
Just don't want Cabela's on O'Brien Drive.
All right, so Frank walked you through this already, but this is our proposed schedule to get to the end of this project. So the ask of you tonight, if you're prepared, is to recommend distribution, is the term in the state act. And then that goes to City Commission to officially approve distribution. 63-day comment period starts the next day and then runs for 9 weeks. And then following that 63-day comment period is when you have the public hearing. That's what Frank was saying. That's at that point where we're hoping to have for you guys a 100% draft, basically. Of course, it's possible we may come back and say, hey, we had this comment from the public or an entity that really needs some in-depth discussion, and then we'll do that. But if we're ready to go, then there'd be a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission that night, and if you're comfortable, you'd recommend to council or to commission. And then in mid-September, the City Commission, if they're comfortable with it, they'd adopt it, and then you've got it. So the end is in sight, and hopefully everyone is pretty comfortable with where we're at.
one comment I will add about something that we've already seen time and time again, that is a conflict point, particularly in the public process, is road connectivity. So what you see on the plans and the drawings and the stylistic drawings are best practices for road connectivity. To give you an example, Lincoln Lawrence, right? I don't know if there's a real project on that site or not. That's a whole other issue. The issue that you folks will eventually deal with is, okay, here's a strategically placed piece of property between two traffic signals on M45 You're not getting any more traffic signals, more than at Maynard and at Kinney. So this big piece of property, is going to come out onto Lake Michigan Drive without a signal. I think we can say that pretty fairly, right, Scott?
They're not gonna get a signal for sure.
There you go. So there's a limitation, right, if we're doing a SWOT analysis. So now it comes down to, how do we plug this road connectivity together? So what you folks directed us to do on this site and English Hills Golf Course, et cetera, all these other big properties, is put down really a best practice for roads. Now, we all know, and we may want to put a disclaimer in the plan, another disclaimer, this is getting to be like a legal document, but the road network shown is based on best design principles for access management. Final decisions will be made by the Planning Commission and the City Commission. Because we all know that there will be significant resistance to any kind of road connectivity. I think that's unfortunate because what we do is dig ourselves a hole in the long run by having cul-de-sacs and all of these streets. But it's one of the things that sometimes that's what happens, you know? So that's just something that I bring to your forefront, and we'll make sure that's all taken care of before we get to 100% care.
Speaking of that, the planning commission isn't a political arm, so we don't have to be politically correct. We can say, this is best practices, this is what we're recommending. Then when it goes to city commissions, they can go yell at the city commission. Seriously, we have to, sometimes we get, let's make a deal, like Tom White says, no way. This is what we're proposing, and this is what needs to happen for these best practices. So always keep that in mind on the planning commission, because we don't have to get elected.
Plus, I think Frank framed this one in terms that I think are important. Like, there's no possibility of another traffic signal in this area. So funneling all of those housing units out on one street isn't going to work. They have to disperse somewhere. And so, you know, the model where the development looks like a tree, right, with a trunk and branches is not going to work. It's going to have to connect into other places. So, but it's going to have to be put in those terms, right?
Well, I have a problem with them not saying, oh, we're not gonna permit any more traffic signals. Well, there are times when there's a development, you get right on Wilson to the south, and there's traffic signal. You go Lake Michigan Drive, west of Wilson, traffic signal. It's like.
That's
They
true.
haven't said that, that completely, we just know.
And that's where I think if you put the disclaimer language in there,
Yeah, I understand the disclaimer,
but look at the number of units, and this is why we put these numbers in there. If you say, yeah, you'll get somewhere around 450. All right, 10 trips, even though there's a small potential multifamily component, 4,500 trips a day. You know, we'll get into the details of the traffic analysis. I don't know if they're going to get a warrant for the city. If you route them all to one spot, they probably will, but is that a best design? You know, or do you make some connectivity here? It's one of those things that's not easy, and it's really not the purpose of the plan to get to that level of detail. The rubber hits the road when an actual site plan comes in.
What's surprising is there's a lot of residential, there's not a lot of room for industrial, commercial, which a while back Grover said that to me, that Walker's running out of commercial in industrial space.
I didn't put a citywide map in here. Maybe I should have. But there isn't, we didn't designate them as SULs, but there's lots on 3 Mile. There's a chunk of Northridge is still, it's almost not even built, right?
Walker,
And that's,
Walker
yeah.
View is still there, but
Yeah.
I mean, they're still filling up steadily.
Well,
Yeah.
remember, this is a 20-year plan. So years ago, when we did the precise plat for Northridge between Fruitridge and 4 Mile and Cordis, that was kind of a 20-year plan. And by the time 20 years is up, we did that in 08, by 2028, you'll probably be filled with that. This plan will be in mid-pattern, and we'll start saying, okay, where do we need to find other places? Who knows what Alpine Avenue will look like in 2029? You know,
Yeah.
there may be a lot of vacant property. So the best you can do, and there might be, you know, I mean, look at, and it's interesting, if you look
Yep.
at the third chapter we put together, that was kind of review of all your previous plans, the tone has changed tremendously in this country since that, and I think I wrote that in October of last year. So things can happen suddenly. The best thing you're trying to do here is lay out reasonable uses. And like Chris said, we probably have enough industrial and commercial space to absorb and reuse over the next 20 years.
Yeah, I guess my concern as a planner too with industrial is you put it somewhere and it has impacts on what's around it.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, well, that's gotta be industrial, and that's gotta be industrial, and then you end up.
You're advancing mostly here.
Yeah,
in what
yeah,
you're doing,
yeah,
so.
that's what we're trying to do.
Anything else then, or?
I think that's it for me, if you guys are ready to, take a vote.
Well, I saw all the little tiny detail things that Frank sent you.
Yeah,
You're gonna be able to get those done, right?
oh yeah, that's no problem. And then those will get done before the plan is distributed on the 23rd. So we don't want one of those hanging around, Yeah, that's where we're at.
I don't see any major things that would say we shouldn't recommend it, but I'm the chair, so.
I'll make a motion that we approve it for whatever the sentence was that disappeared.
Distribution.
To send it to the city commission consideration.
Whatever, it was up there a second ago. No, that's fine. I mean, yeah,
Distribution is the key word.
yes, make a motion, approve it for distribution.
I support.
It's a motion by Tom, supported by Pat. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One step further.
Thanks, folks. See you soon.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weather. Got nicer out.
Just a question, I didn't see that on the agenda.
It wasn't.
Okay. I'm sure, it's just working at home, every day runs the same, and it's like, what the world did I miss here?
What's not?
Tyler,
Yeah,
we still need to do the review of
the minutes.
minutes.
I know.
And, okay, I just wanted.
I jumped him in first to get that through.
Okay.
So we can move on. Next item on the agenda is a review of the meeting minutes for May 20th, 2022, 2020. Any comments or changes?
Make a motion to approve them.
Motion by Scott, supported by Tom. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Next item on the agenda is a general public comment. This provision is made to encourage the expression of questions and concerns regarding non-public hearing items and issues not on the agenda. If you'd like to, if anybody in the audience would like to address anything to the planning commission that's not on the agenda tonight, please stand up and state your name and address for the record. Nobody? Okay, moving on. Next item on the agenda is public hearing. Final area site plan review, 330 Wilson Avenue Northwest, new 4,383 square foot building for S&amp Properties Walker LLC, which is a Culver's restaurant.
Did you already approve the minutes?
Huh?
Did you already vote on minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Hey, we move along here.
Okay.
Yeah, Tyler's a little quicker than Terry sometimes.
Messing around with this computer. Okay. So we have Culver's of Walker here. They're proposing a drive-through restaurant, a double drive-through restaurant, on the, in our familiar Westtown PUD. Mouse is sensitive to the air. Let's go back, here we go. Okay, so, just a little overview of the property and the request. This is a final area site plan. Again, part of the Westtown PUD, commercial PUD. The parent address is 330 Wilson Avenue, and it's lot C4 of the Westtown PUD. The lot size is 1.57 acres. Zoning district is commercial PUD. The future land use designation is commercial. And the general location, as you're familiar with, is the southeast corner of Lake Michigan Drive and Wilson Avenue. And we have Chris McGuire here tonight to talk about the project. So just a little bit of background about this particular drive-through restaurant. The map on the screen there shows all the Culver's locations in and around Grand Rapids, so they're getting quite established over here. They're a chain restaurant, first established in Salt City, Wisconsin, and they are known for their burgers and frozen custard. I've never been there, only because I don't eat meat. So again, they are lot C4 of the West Town PUD, right along that shared access drive. And this is an overview of the site plan. One thing I wanted to have the applicant clarify is, and I noticed this as I was putting this slideshow together, that area that's highlighted, it says for future. So I'm not sure, and Chris, I can't see you from here. I'll have you clarify when we're finished why it says for future. Maybe it's supposed to be there, maybe not, but I just noticed that, so I wanted to bring that up. But this is the overall site plan. Most of the infrastructures are here. We've got the access road running along the north-south, running north and south along the east end of the parcel. This is the architecture that they're proposing for the restaurant. And now I'm just going to go through some of the highlights from my staff report. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is traffic and circulation. This is pretty standard what they're proposing for the circulation of traffic throughout the site for a double drive-through. All of the widths look good. The only thing missing here, and this is maybe more of a Scott thing, they'll need to provide a cross-access agreement between their lot and the neighbor to the north, lot C3. And this is listed as a condition of approval. The signage that they're proposing is not consistent with what was approved for the preliminary area site plan. So the PUD calls for monument signs. They're proposing pylon signs. So we'll just have the applicant revise the sign package, which I believe they've already taken care of that. So we'll need a different sign package that reflects a ground mount sign. The lighting, I kind of went back and forth with the applicant on this. So they're showing kind of higher light levels than what I'm used to seeing at the lot line. I used the model that the Consumers Credit Union had for lighting in the recommendation, which was 0-foot candles at all the property lines. And so in seeing the brightness on the northern portion of this property line, I thought, okay, this probably needs to be scaled back a bit. After some discussion with Frank, talking about how, the lighting here could be beneficial in this commercial district, or even encouraged, but what we don't want is higher lighting levels on the east property line, that's the direction of the residential. So what I've added as a condition of approval is that the applicant work with the community development staff to come up with a photometric plan that's acceptable. So that's where I'll leave that one. And then landscaping. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention is that the street trees are proposed in the right of way. And it's my understanding that this is okay MDOT doesn't want anything, too crazy in the right of way. One of the reasons that their trees are proposed in the right of way is that they struggled with trying to meet all of our parking requirements, and also meeting all the landscaping requirements. This lot has it has both of those shared access roads on it, so not as much space for being able to add landscaping. There are some deciduous trees shown over on the right-hand corner of that drawing. That's along the eastern side, which is toward the residential, which we would prefer. So in my original staff report, I think I mentioned that we needed deciduous trees there, but those are deciduous trees, so we're good with that. And then we just have 4 conditions, 5, I have 1 added condition of approval. So the applicant shall submit a recorded copy of the cross-access agreement between lot C4 and C3 prior to building occupancy. The applicant shall submit a revised sign package that includes a monument sign instead of a pylon sign prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall work with the city of Walker and MDOT to select tree species along Wilson Avenue and submit a revised landscape plan to reflect the species that were chosen prior to building occupancy. Number 4 is that the applicant shall address all the items listed in the city engineer's report dated 6/4/2020. And then the 5th one is just to have the applicant clarify, either remove or have a clarification note added to the plan for on page C201 regarding the note that says for future.
Okay, Tricia, any questions, Tricia? Scott?
It's very much a plug-and-play site, so stuff's been all kind of worked out in advance in terms of stormwater access and all that. The one item that Trish mentioned first is the cross-access easement, and that's really the only loose end we have. Just to be clear, though, that cross-access easement includes a portion of this lot and a portion of the lot to the north, just so that somebody can get in and out of that full driveway as if there was no property line there at all. We don't want to get in a situation where somebody gets mad, puts up a concrete bollard or something like that because they're competing for selling hamburgers or who's got the best shape or something like that. So it's got to be wide open. That's it.
Pat?
Hey Scott, on that access road, are we not planning any sidewalk down that access road?
I don't believe so. I think that we encourage the lots themselves to have good access back and forth. And I think some of them have access straight out to Wilson where there is sidewalk.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
the internal road will be mostly vehicular. I mean, you're still gonna have some people walking over from the apartments.
That's what I was thinking.
But I think we addressed most of that on the east-west ring road that we call West Town something.
Yeah.
West Town Drive.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Scott then? Do you have anything to add, or?
You'd like from here or up? Whichever.
Why don't you come up here, state your name for the record, please?
Chris, did you want me to add or turn on your?
No, that's fine. You did a great job. Thank you. My name is Chris McGuire with McCon Building Corporation, address 1059 Circle Drive, Highland, Wisconsin. Brief background, we've worked with Culver's for 23 years. We work in 20 states, completed more than 180 new stores, another 180 remodels. So we do travel quite a bit. And I want to thank the city staff for their professional approach and guidance, especially during this very interesting time. Tricia's been especially helpful with everything that we're going through. To clarify the future drive-through, what happened is that in the last month, Culver Franchising had been resisting a double drive-through concept for more than 15 years. And since everything basically went 100% drive-through over the last 2 months, it has been recognized that it's possible. So we are now just simply have the ability to label it future. We expect that by the beginning of next year, that there will be the appropriate hardware, software in place to manage the process of a double drive-through. So that is why the requested change during the process after you'd seen the initial concept. Everything we are working on currently anywhere in the country is doing this exact same thing. With respect to the cross-access easement agreement, it's my understanding from the attorneys is that it's stipulation as part of the purchase agreement that they have to allow everybody back and forth through the various properties, but it will certainly be clarified and taken care of. And with respect to the signage, I had seen the first sign. I talked to the sign contractor, and it has been updated. We strongly encouraged him to comply rather than trying to fight an uphill battle on that. So he did do that, and I don't know, I believe it's compliant with your wishes, but we will make sure that everything is the way you want it. Along with the lighting, we'll make sure that everything's the way you want it on that. So I appreciate all your time and help, and if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
What's the planned future thing for this?
That's the reference to the drive-through. I am permitted by Culver Franchising to identify a future drive-through. I am not able to put a menu board on it today. The stores that yesterday we got permission to open Goshen, Indiana. Today we were finishing up Three Rivers, Michigan. Next week we're doing Charlotte, Michigan. No store currently has a double drive-through. Ionia, we're planning on to start very soon, and that store will have the first test store for double drive-through concept. So it truly will. The only thing that it'll really do is that, as I've explained it to other franchisees, is that an owner we worked for in Kansas City, when somebody pulls up ahead of me in line and says, "Can you give me a minute?" At the window, they can go to the second person, the other person at the other menu. So whomever is prepared to place an order can make the order. That's the only difference, really.
What are the hours of operations of this one?
Traditional hours of operations are 10 a.m. until midnight. That midnight is only during, say, summer or if there's a fall recreation sports. Otherwise, in general, they're off at 11 p.m., but that's never later than midnight.
Any plans to serve breakfast?
Culver's hasn't done that. There were 5 stores that did that, and that was moved out of the system. The biggest issue is the crossover from switching from the breakfast to lunch. There's a lot of people that we work for that were in the McDonald's world, and that was the biggest transition. So Culver's opening at 10 a.m. versus 10:30 was a big step toward addressing breakfast.
Tricia, the signage on all 4 sides, does that meet our requirements? The Culver sign on all 4 sides?
So that's questionable, and if that is something that the applicant wants to use as a PUD benefit, that would be up to the planning commission to decide whether or not the signage on all 4 sides of the building would be permitted.
Where it sits, I don't have a problem with it, but, because it's not up against any residential or anything, but
Right. I mean, it's typical Culver's restaurant.
I'm more concerned about that we don't have a pole sign.
Right.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one question. I just wanted to make sure that structurally, the site is still going to, like, you're still planning on building the site in accordance with the plan, and you'd be adding the second drive-through later, once it gets approved?
The intent on it would be to the identification of future. By the time we get close to the opening, I'm expecting that there will be a plan in place that's been approved to allow for the second drive-through. There was a conference call today that addressed the issue of second drive-through. I was not part of that conference call. There were 8 different franchisees from around the country that we put together to work with corporate on getting that approved. But they are very, very familiar with the process, and I expect it to come through very soon. It will be a positive and allow for better flow. It'll actually prevent the longer lines, if you will.
Yep, I understand all that. I just wanted to make sure that the plan itself is what you're
That is correct. The only thing that would happen is if we don't have the second drive-through menu board at the time of opening, which if approved here, we hope to open this before Christmas. If it turns out that, let's just say it's at Thanksgiving instead of January 1st, if the menu board is not available until January 1st, then what would happen is that we would put a barrier that looks decent, so people aren't cutting across there. They want to go through the actual order line and to avoid any confusion on it. We are having to address that in all of the stores that we're in design on right now as to how, I have a presentation tomorrow night near Chicago for the same question.
Okay. As long as you, I mean, I think I would feel more comfortable with having a more detailed note on the plan when you revise the plan.
Okay?
Just have a more detailed note that explains what that is, because you will be, the approval that you get tonight is when it's time for construction, your plan must be in accordance with the plan that was approved by the planning commission.
Understood. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So we're gonna approve dual drive-through tonight, if we're still in time, correct?
That's my understanding. It's the way it's written.
Fisher wants a clearer note, so.
That's the number
for-
5
the
condition
for
of,
fu- The for future, we'll say,
yeah,
you just
number
take the
5
four-
condition of approval.
you take the for future out, and this, we're gonna approve the plan with dual drive-through, as shown on whatever page it is.
It's pretty benign compared to other drive-throughs we have. They still have good circulation. They're not blocking people in or out. So it seems pretty reasonable.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so I need a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Scott, support by Pat, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? If anybody in the audience would like to address this case, please stand and please state your name and address for the record.
Move to close it.
Support?
Support, yes.
Motion by Tom, support by Scott, to close the public hearing, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I make a motion on case number 20-860, Culver's of Walker Final Area Site Plan. I make a motion to approve the final area site plan for Culver Drive-Thru Restaurant project located at 330 Wilson Avenue, also known as Lot C4 of the Westtown Commercial PUD, as it does meet the standards set forth in the City of Walker zoning ordinance. Conditions of final area site plan approval are: number 1, the applicant should submit a revised sign package and include the monument signs that are pylon sign prior to the issuance of the building permit. The applicant shall work with the Community Development Department to revise the photometric plan to reduce the foot candle light projection over the northern property line to an acceptable level prior to the issuance of the building permit. Number 3, the applicant shall work with the City of Walker and MDOT to select tree species along Wilson Avenue and submit a revised landscape plan reflecting the species choice. Number 4, the applicant shall secure and record the cross-access easement and provide revised plans to reflect the record instrument number for the city engineer's report dated 6/4/2020. And number 5, the applicant shall revise the drawing about the for future on the drawing to show dual drive-through. Findings of fact from section 94-213-7E. The final area site plan conforms to the current proposed City of Walker master plan. Final area site plan is in compliance with the approved Westtown Commercial preliminary area site plan, and the plan complements the existing uses in the area.
Okay, we have a motion by Pat, is there support?
Second.
Support by Joe. Questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved.
Thank you.
So,
My wife will agree with the double drive-through, because the wait right now is too long.
I love their custard. Okay,
little bit of background. The current business is located on Ken O'Shea Industrial Drive in the city of Grand Rapids. I went to their website and watched this little video, and I was really impressed with what they do there. They specialize in decorative glass for the office furniture, retail, university, healthcare industries. So to get a better picture of what they do, just picture any kind of really fancy glass that you might see inside an office building. I learned from their website that they strive to implement eco-friendly practices and innovation in their painting and manufacturing processes. So essentially they're growing just like everybody else, which has led to the need for more space, and they're going to need additional employees. So the property and the request, they are asking for site plan approval for a 59,221 square foot industrial building, and to provide approval for, oh, I just said that, sorry. Site plan review, this lot size is roughly 5 acres. It's currently zoned industrial park. The future land use designation for this parcel is industrial. And the general location is on the east side of Wilson, north of 3 Mile in the North Wilson Commerce Park. So the photo on the left is what the site currently looks like right now. It's situated between two developed sites on the north and on the south, right there off Wilson. Pretty heavily wooded and vegetated right now, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's encumbered with a lot of wetlands on the site. And also, as you can see on the general location and zoning map, surrounded by industrial, in the industrial park there. And here is a snapshot of the site plan, just a brief overview here. They're proposing a retaining wall. They plan to preserve a portion of the wetlands here. This is a future phase of the building. Right now they're proposing this portion here, and then over here they're proposing some office space. Parking, driveways, stormwater management are all also associated with the plan here. Here's some architectural renderings for what they propose to have the building look like when it's all finished. And I'm going to go through some of the highlights from my staff report. The first one is I came across a few inconsistencies with square footages throughout the plan. Luckily, I had a chance to talk to the applicant to clarify what was being proposed for office and what was being proposed for the industrial portion, the manufacturing and the warehouse and the production spaces. So they're proposing 4,366 square feet for the office portion of the building, and then the rest, 54,855 square feet for the warehouse production area. This is obviously important in doing those parking calculations. So the plan will be revised to reflect the accurate square footages accordingly. The next piece here is landscaping. I've gone and highlighted all the areas that will have some landscaping added. The majority of this site, of the vegetation on this site, will be removed to make way for the grading and obviously the buildings and all the impervious surfaces I've seen in a lot of places where rain gardens are proposed on a plan, they look really nice on the plan, and then they don't get maintained and they don't function in the way that they're intended to. So the plans that are proposed for the rain gardens have a job to do, so we want to make sure that they are maintained. As I said before, the site is pretty encumbered with wetlands. All the areas highlighted or outlined in white on the photo here have been delineated by King and McGuire Environmental. And the applicant included that report with the application. They're proposing to place 1,200, a little over 1,200 cubic yards of fill on the site. They're obviously working with Eagle to secure a permit for making this, or for adding the fill. And the plan does show that they will be preserving a portion of wetland B on the site. So that's the one that's up in the northeast corner, the northwest corner. And Scott's gonna add more to the wetland and the fill and the Eagle permits. So now we're to the conditions of approval, and so we've got, the applicant shall revise the plan to create consistency among all the square footages prior to the issuance of a building permit. As far as the rain gardens go, we will need to have the applicant submit a maintenance agreement for the rain gardens prior to occupancy of the building. The applicant shall provide a copy of the wetland permit prior to any construction on site. And I think I had a little typo there in my presentation. It should say engineer's report, but the applicant shall complete all the items listed in the city engineer's report dated June 4, 2020.
Okay, any questions for Tricia?
There's no possibility of keeping any of the trees that are there, especially on the north side of that?
Well,
Proposed like the phase 2,
let me move where I can see Cheryl.
or they're just not good trees to keep around anyways? I mean, what's going out there that's-
I talked to Cheryl during the site plan review committee, and, obviously it's always the best option to try and preserve as many mature trees as possible. But, sure. Go over here. You guys have such a nice big room.
Cheryl Scales, Progressive AE, 1811 4 Mile Road, Grand Rapids. We can look at that, preserving that, those trees. We didn't have a really good identification from the survey that was provided to us to decide that. We were planning on pretty much grading out that flat area so that when they did decide to do an addition, all they would have to do is just come in, build the building pad and build the building on top of it. We could take a look at those and see, and maybe work with Tricia and resubmit a plan if you would like that. The landscape plan does show quite a few new trees going in there that would obviously come out later anyway, so.
As long as the trees are decent size and
Sure.
not little,
Yeah,
quarter.
yeah, I don't know,
They specify what size
Right,
trees
I
are.
know.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, in the middle of that wetland,
You're gonna clear cut the whole lot,
yeah.
and then, so.
I mean,
We can add that as a condition of approval, if you'd like, that the applicant shall work with community development department to show a revised landscape plan that
Just
shows.
relook at it, that's all.
sure,
Just relook at it, make sure that nothing can be seen.
I think sadly, the only way to really save trees on a site like this is to reduce the size of the development.
Well, that's what I thought with phase 2, if they could keep them on before, I don't know how long it's gonna be before phase 2 would happen, is it 10 years,
Yeah.
20 years, I mean, no one even knows.
yeah. Yeah, we'll certainly have no problem looking at that.
So we are approving phase 2 tonight.
Phase 1.
We showed phase 2 just a master plan for the entire site and also as part of the wetland permit. We needed to show that to be able to get one permit for the entire site. We would obviously come back with the,
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Scott, I can get his report.
Cheryl's not there yet.
yes, I don't,
Cheryl's all set, I can line her after.
no, I'm here for questions.
Okay. This lot is about 25 years old, so it's been around for an awful long time here in this industrial park. And, you know, what you see a lot of times with a lot that's been around this long is lots of mature trees, wetlands and holes and things like that. So unfortunately, it's just part of, you know, finishing up an industrial park like this, and there's a few boxes that they've got to check environmentally to work through that. So, I added to my report, the list that we gave the site plan review, because I think sometimes it helps to show, the progress that's made and, you know, the positive direction. So that's there kind of for reference. The items that remain from an engineering standpoint, the trash enclosure is shown within the consumer's energy, which is also ITC. Consumer's energy has split into two different divisions over the years. ITC is more of the towers and things that carry the power from region to region, and not part of the distribution that goes to the different buildings. But regardless of that, they work together, and that's a difficult thing to do, to put a structure in there. So I've got an email into them. I have not heard back, but the problems there will be a developer problem. So they'll have to get those approvals to allow structures to be in that easement. And again, there are impediments, so they're pretty critical of that. There might be some rules. My concern would be if they say no, or if they say at some point, we're coming through, which they're doing in part of the city right now. They're coming through and wiping everything out to make sure that the power's consistent and regular. There's not a backup spot for that enclosure, so keep that in mind. Tricia mentioned the wetlands. There's a significant amount of wetlands there. I think that's all doable. They can certainly buy additional wetlands in a wetlands bank to kind of compensate for that. But what we have to see is that they mimic the existing hydrology to the extent possible, so that what wetland they save is truly worth saving, because they're going to be rerouting water all over the place, and it's pretty difficult to put the design together that's going to put just the right amount of water in there to keep it alive, but not turn it into a pond or just a bunch of cattails instead of a higher quality wetland. So they did give us a report here. I think it was Monday afternoon. We haven't gotten through that yet. But if this moves forward, that will be reviewed as part of the stormwater permit at staff level. And along with that, we had some questions for Cheryl about how the water was going to be put into the storm sewer out in North Wilson. And that'll also have to be reviewed. I think it was intended for a lot of that water to be on the south end of the site. So if it goes in on the north end of the site, the pipes may not be sized appropriately, so we've got to work through that. I think Cheryl's done a little bit of homework. We just haven't had a chance to catch up on that. The roof drainage should all be tied into the storm sewer, pretty regular stuff for us with industrial sites. And then, as was mentioned before with the rain gardens, that's a really unique way to do some pre-treatment and then help filter some of the water back into the existing wetlands that are going to be saved, which is great. But maintenance of those wetlands, the particular design, how much soil, what depth, compaction, types of peat, types of vegetation, that's all very critical, so that when the designer and the contractor walk away, the owner has something that can be kept alive and maintained. So that's something that we need to get on the plan, and in particular to have a maintenance schedule so that they know they've got to go out and weed it and take care of it. Tricia mentioned some bad examples. We've got a bad example right behind the library that we didn't take care of. And we went back to it 3 or 4 years later and said, I don't even know if we can save this thing, because it requires yearly maintenance, so that's important. That's it.
Questions for Scott?
It appears to me that there's a lot of loose ends here. How confident are we that Eagle will approve this wetland permit? I've seen them throw curve
Sure.
balls. We got the drainage issue out there. Is the street pipe big enough?
Mhm.
To me, there's a lot of loose ends that could derail things here.
If I,
Cheryl might be able to talk to.
Sure.
She did provide a little report.
sure, we did provide the calculations for Scott. The way the site, just to give you a little background, is there's a 6-inch line that comes in off the street and connects to the wetland. There used to be an 18-inch equalizer culvert because there was a railroad that went through there. The only discharge from that pond is that 6-inch pipe. So we're proposing to send a small portion of the front parking lot into a little wetland area, rain garden area, to treat it for sediments. And the calculations you'll see that Nick did shows that that pond can handle that flow, and it won't be adding any more additional flow than that little 6-inch pipe that's there right now. And then the 18-inch stub that's on the southwest corner, can handle the rest of the water. So I think Scott has those calculations that will answer those questions for him. And if we don't get the Eagle permit, we have no project. But as you know, that takes 4 months, so we wanted to get all this in place so that should we be fortunate enough to get that permit, then we would be able to start construction in August. So that's why we're here. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to have that answer for you until August, and we really would like to know that the city is in favor of this project before we bid it all and sign contracts to go ahead.
Well, I'm sure that we're all in favor of the project.
Sure.
I see some hand grenades out there that
Right, well,
possibly have a pin pulled.
right,
I looked at this lot and wondered how you're bringing a bill up, but.
yeah, there's a lot of wetlands there. And we've had our first round of questions, and they haven't been, there's no way we're gonna permit this. They're like, give us a little more information on the rain garden. So they haven't been anything major.
Any other questions for Cheryl?
I also have Jeff Harwood here. He's the architect, if you have any questions on the building. I blame him for the wrong square footages. Like a good civil engineer, I blame the architect.
It's my fault. You just dropped any pictures of you back up there. Exactly.
Well, I think the world is a civil engineer,
Thank you.
everything was just zero, so this is all kind of new to me, the whole topography and drainage and stuff, so.
Tricia, why isn't this a public hearing?
Well, we did send out public hearing notice, or not public hearing notices, but this is regular site plan approval versus final area site plan approval as part of the PUD. And so regular site plan approval doesn't require a public hearing, but we send out a courtesy meeting notice.
Okay. I was just curious.
I think this was done as a plat, wasn't it? An industrial plat, which is, I don't think we've seen many of them since then, so it doesn't require a whole lot of extra stuff.
Did you have a comment, sir? I don't know why you're here.
I'm with the engineer.
Oh.
He's the drainage calculation guy.
Okay.
I'm trying to get him to
He has his own name?
This is Nick.
He's not gonna tell you his name.
Nick Craig. This is Nick Craig.
So we have no public here.
He's the future.
You do remember, you do know I may have to deal with it.
That's right.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Not no problem.
Good luck with Eagle, but
Thank you, yeah. It all hinges on that.
I will entertain a motion if somebody wants to forward a motion.
I can make a motion to approve the site plan set revision dated 5/28/2020 and supporting application materials for a 59,221 square foot industrial building with office space and related site improvements for Specialty Glass Products, Inc. at the property located at 3164 Wilson Drive Northwest. Conditions of site plan approval, the applicant agrees shall revise the plan to reflect accurate and consistent square footages for the industrial and office uses within the building prior to the issuance of a building permit. A rain garden maintenance agreement shall be submitted to the city engineer prior to the issuance of occupancy. The applicant shall obtain a wetland permit from Eagle prior to the issuance of a building permit. And the applicant shall work with the engineering department to address all items noted in the city engineer's report dated 6/4/2020.
Support.
Motion by Steve, support by Pat. Other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for getting me out of Rockford.
Getting you out of right.
I've been homebound for so long. All of my meetings have been Zoom.
Yeah, I heard Zoom.
Teams.
On a,
Thank you.
agreement for the rain garden,
Good to see you.
do we follow this?
That man came from Lansing, I totally forgot that we had the early start time, so that totally threw me off.
You guys like the early start time?
We are going to
Yes,
start
I do.
doing that as the state's going to
You know what?
so we're gonna become stronger.
If I'm working from the office again, then guys don't like
It's a law.
6 o'clock. If I'm working from home, that's one thing.
I like it.
You guys wanna vote on it?
No.
Maybe not today, maybe if we, because the two that are absent are the ones
Yeah.
that we might want to have the input from, because like, for myself, I usually, 6:30 would be the ideal time, because that's right when I would roll in from Lansing if I were leaving at 5 o'clock. But it's, I don't know, I think it's all discussion, and certainly something we as a board should make doing, certain all the things.
I'd say try it.
Try 6:30 at the next meeting?
No, well, if that works for Steve, then 6:30, yeah, that's a little bit more buffer if I'm working.
Well, I'd like to know from Terry too, because he gets
Yeah.
stuck in Kentwood
Yeah.
quite often. I mean, I
Like, we all.
work a mile from my house, which is only 3 miles from here, so.
Right. I mean, we signed up for the board with the 7 o'clock time, so that's the only reason I would say that we want to make sure everybody is
Yeah, it
okay
has to
with
be
that
pretty
before we
much
make any
consensus,
change.
in
Yeah,
my opinion.
for any long-term period.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me because the last one where I called in, said, well, I'm gonna start at 6:15 and hope I'll be hooked up by 7 o'clock. And it's like, 6 o'clock, where'd that come from? Oh, somebody made it 6, didn't put it in big bold black, red, and green letters or something.
You can blame me for that.
I'll blame you for that.
Hey Cheryl, what's up next for us?
Me, Tricia?
Cheryl, that's Tricia.
Tricia, sorry.
We have,
Cheryl left.
Cheryl just left.
we have, a couple of projects for some existing sites. So one of them is, the redevelopment of a site over on 3 Mile for Culligan in Grand Rapids. And then we also have, some parking addition for an existing business called Sun Med over off, Northridge. So, very exciting. But other than that, we're still working with the people from the Lincoln Lawns. So they have recently hired, or they're having their attorney correspond with Frank and I now, to make sure that they're not missing anything.
I saw Frank sent him a very specific note on how to proceed, because we don't want this fiasco again.
Yeah.
That's a
And
power
so
keg.
they're getting hung up on the community meeting portion of things. So we told them that we will not have them at the planning commission until they have their community meeting, because, we don't wanna have 1 million people here at the planning commission, you know, for obvious reasons. And so the governor's still got the, executive order that prohibits gatherings of more than 10 people. So that's kind of, they're saying, can we do this via Zoom? And Frank and the mayor are weighing in on it, saying it's not the same, we'd rather have you do it in person. So
Yes.
that's kind of where we're at with
They
that.
can do 100 outdoors, can't they?
Yeah, we
They
should
got
have.
plenty of land there
Whole
Yeah.
outdoor,
in the parking lot.
outdoor community meeting. You know.
Pat's gonna be out there, Pat's gonna be out there with his Antifa stuff on.
Of course, drains through my backyard.
Yeah.
So, and there's no meeting next week, which originally we had back-to-back meetings planned, so keep that in mind too.
Yep.
Schedule's kind of,
Speaking of that, can you send out a meeting invite to us so that we know exactly when you want us?
that would be really helpful.
On Outlook,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
okay.
I hate to say the other guy, but used to send that out and we responded, and he would know that yes, we were coming or we weren't
And we
coming.
copied your calendar.
And there
at the
were
right time.
links to the packet, so you don't have to go hunt on the website, city's
So I
website.
sent you a link to the packet also.
Yep,
She did.
We gotta be adaptable.
So, but I will send you an Outlook invite
You have to get off your
to
manual
make it
typewriter.
as easy as possible for you to get to
Well,
the
that's what I've been
packet.
told.
That'd be
And
nice.
I'll include a link.
I'm old, I don't react to change very well.
But when it's, the time's changing, the dates change, there's a lot of change going on, we just have to roll with it for a while.
And I work from home every day, and every day is the same, it just, all blurs.
I know, every day Saturday. Any news
No,
on
it's not
Chick-fil-A?
Saturday.
Nope.
I know Frank
I
is
mean,
working with them.
They withdrew from their thing. I guess I didn't fill you in on that. They withdrew their application.
Oh, okay.
Who?
Chick-fil-A. So they would have been on our agenda, on the May 20th meeting that we had. But they withdrew their application, right after everything shut down.
Mayor keeps telling me that's the only project that's really been impacted though, right?
Yeah, really.
Well, from a withdrawal standpoint, but there's been some that have been impacted by the speed of them,
Yeah.
like slow down.
Yeah, with like construction, things like that, or,
Yeah, like the two sites on North Ridge that are next to each other, they're having a little trouble kind of
oh,
getting the momentum going back up again.
Seems like Blaine's didn't have any issues, man, they're like flying. Holy.
Oh,
But
the
I
other
did-
thing that we have coming up that I forgot to mention is on the July 1st agenda, we'll have a draft ordinance that would allow temporary outdoor seating for restaurants to be in line with what the state is doing, allowing people to have outdoor seating because their capacity is at 50%. And Steve's kind of taking the lead on that, so we really appreciate that.
yeah. So, Mayor, myself, and Frank have been working really hard to get something together just to help out the restaurants, so. It's coming.
Yeah, make sure you guys go to the restaurants now. We got.
Yeah, everybody buy pizzas over at Franco's on Alpine. They got for sale signs in the window. I think they're trying to game me into buying more pizza, but it's working, so.
We had Franco's on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, good pizza.
Yeah, it is.
We went to Cello's on Monday night, it was like, wow, what is this?
Yeah, we went to Outback, I think.
Oh, wow. We okay, should we wear a mask?
We went to Outback tonight, so they were busy.
Probably wants to go to Alfonso's on Thursday, but they're gonna open soon, that might be a year from now.
Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn? Adjourn.
Good. Great.
Tricia, you know
Glad
that
I,
architect here, right?
Glad I made it
Are
at
you
all.
friends with them?
You guys were almost done when I got here. I
Yeah,
clicked
progressive architect.
hearing on the,
Oh, was that his?
Yeah. I saw that
you guys
fall
end
off.
up talking about it, or they just kind of open up
That's
the
my
hearing?
neighbor.
Yeah, we went to the SUL.
Oh, yeah, so like the list that Frank put together.
Yep.
Yeah, unsurprising.
Get out of bed, 3 minutes later, I've been through the bathroom and I'm sitting in my desk.
Make it more smooth.
Well, I'll,
Yeah, I
I'll
mean,
make
so this is
remember
my
how much I
favorite
needed that
stage
level, I
of
suppose. It's
And
weird.
I find that everybody.
I've been here almost every day since this
So
all
I'm
started.
still working on it.
Everybody had his.
Oh, yeah, the newsletter.
But yeah, any point
The only
that
change
you
has been that I
Well,
walked
that's a style.
for a while.
Yeah.
You know, and burned out myself. It's just.
That was my initial reaction, it's like, yeah, everybody's
That's a long time, but.
They said, no, we don't want you to.
I want to keep the trees
6 months
down.
straight,
Planning commission.
just a half day off.
Everybody's gonna turn on me.
Oh, he was all about trees.
I free when it's up, doing.
Yeah, that's kind of my too.
Still working. You doing okay?
Well, thank
Problem
you.
is going home, I had days that I would do it. Something up at 6.
It's okay, you just got that close to me. So it doesn't matter, it's just like, again, I'm holding somebody else's
I had
back.
access to our.
Scott,
And
today,
today we lost power downtown.
is that weird?
1,500. And then the generator, my network dropped about 10 times in an hour.
Oh, his daughter and my son were in the same class this
The
year.
good thing
He
is,
lives
I
in
got.
my neighborhood, and I literally run into him all the time.
Yeah, I get,
Downtown in Rockford, run into him.
yeah, I'm burned out.
We'll be like at the park,
I can't get
or
ahead.
with his
I'm
kids.
thinking that first week of
Like,
July,
yeah,
I'm
school,
gonna just
there
get
he
in the car
is.
and get out of here, go someplace.
You know, I
Our pass had lost me
I
time
took a
to get
couple of bags of
products
stuff home, and I
in
said,
Kansas
you know what,
Township.
after about 2
when I
weeks
was
at
there.
home, I'm gonna scratch
And
it, things
so,
to do.
yeah, it's
Nope.
weird, I mean,
All right, see ya.
Okay, I'm gonna leave this stuff here, I don't know where the recycle bin